everybody has potential. Everybody has ways in which they're born to shine and be different. And one of my favorite quotes is, why fit in when you were born to stand out? I love sharing that in my talks. Let's just find out, like, what is the part of you that was born to stand out? Because the rest of your life is telling you that you have to fit in, to be accepted, to be liked, to be valuable, to be validated, to be loved. And actually, we all know that doesn't necessarily work. So let's figure out, like, what about you is so unique, and let's celebrate that and bring that person so you can rise and shine as that person.
According to recent research, 80% of teenage girls understand the importance of being active and doing exercise, but 2/3 say they're not keen on taking part because of low confidence and self-esteem. With adult women in the UK being less active than men, it's clear this is a problem we need to address early in life. Sophie Storm Roberts became an adventure athlete after realising her work wasn't letting her live in line with her values. Through setting herself some incredible challenges, she learned how important it is to nurture your own self-belief. She took the lessons she learned and decided to form a brilliant initiative called Trailblazers to empower teenage girls to discover what they have inside and give them the confidence to believe in their futures. This is an empowering conversation, whether you have teenage girls in your life or not, because hearing Sophie speak makes you realise you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. An issue I hear about all the time is the concern over teenage girls becoming kind of disengaged with exercise and movement. In your experience, is that due to a lack of education about the sort of benefits of moving and the need to be active in life, or do you think it runs deeper for that part of the population?
Well, that is a big question, because I think it runs deeper for everybody, especially for this part of the population, for girls. So, all of the information is out there, right, for all of us. Like, what we all know what we should be doing, that we're just literally inundated and overwhelmed with the amount of information of people constantly telling us across every single aspect of our lives we should be eating, drinking, living, looking like, acting, doing with our lives, achieving what success looks like, all these kind of things, especially when it comes to movement. But we're human beings and we're not motivated by the evidence and the statistics. And, we need to manage the human, because that is how we actually move from A to B. And, I kind of dedicate my whole life to really understanding human beings and why we are the way we are, and on a kind of collective and individual basis. So yeah, I would say that with girls, it's absolutely not the issue that they don't know the benefits. It's that they don't have the drive or the motivation, or there's a lot of issues standing in their way of actually getting them to kind of move forward through those issues and those external barriers.
And what would you say the main barriers are that you come across in the work that you do with girls?
There's a lot of peer pressure. There's a lot of fear of looking a certain way, of, all of that. It's all external.
Yeah.
So it's all coming from external sources of, am I doing this properly? Am I going to get laughed at? Am I going to get embarrassed? What happens if I look like a hot and sweaty mess? What if the boys see, all of these kind of things. And there's just so much going on there that's not really that can't be answered by the statistics of, oh, look, we know that this really helps with your mental health, this really helps with that. Body image is a massively huge contributing factor. And obviously, as we know, social media has a huge part to play in that as well. Do I look like the girls on Instagram who are looking like this? I posted something the other day of me looking really red and like all red in the face and sweaty and stuff like that after a workout, because so often, when I work out, women, I'll kind of turn next to them and give them a hug or a high five, and they'll literally immediately apologize for being really sweaty and say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sweaty. And I just think, where does that come from?
Yeah.
Why are we apologizing for being sweaty in our 30s? And that is, to me, it's a sign of a good workout. I'm like, I'm proud if I'm really sweaty. I'm like, you did well, you've responded really well. And that sweat is a result of the effort that got put in.
Yeah, that and it comes down to, as you say, it's this sort of perfectionist messaging about, and it's usually aesthetic. Absolutely, it's always about the what we see, and sadly, a lot of those images of people exercising are in the matching twin set of what they're wearing. Their hair, they're styled and coiffed to
Mm,
look amazing, but it's the fact, as you say, that if someone has worked hard, you're going to see it. And that's, that should be, I'm not a great fan of the word should, but that could be a badge of honor if it was reframed and flipped. And I think as you age, you get less concerned about things like that, because you do connect more with the need for it, the knowing that it's good for you, but also you start to connect more with how it makes you feel. And
mm,
I think potentially as a child, you're not really having that connection. It's more innate, just like the younger child just runs around and plays, and they don't find it difficult to get on and do that because their bodies are naturally driving them to do that, and they respond to those drives. Whereas as a teenager, those drives seem to get dampened down. They're still there, and I even believe they're there for adults, but I think they get dampened down by that sort of those external messages, by how that feeling of what do I look like, and where do I sit in my peer group, and often even, and sadly as well, I think in the experience of my kids and when I was at school, sporty can also be seen as not a great thing, strangely, because it's deemed as, oh, you're talented and amazing. You've said yourself that you don't call yourself a natural athlete, which is interesting given the challenges that you've put yourself through, that we'll come on to talk about. But actually, kids then carry into life this "I'm not sporty" because it's such a esteemed badge of honor, but it's also linked to whether you have an innate talent, and it's so much more about the outcomes than the effort that's put in, and the trying, and the potential, the having fun through moving. And that all seems to get lost in teenage years.
mm.
Hormones at play, I presume, as well. So yeah. And so that obviously then has an effect on their mental health. And there's statistics, aren't there, around mental health and confidence for teenage girls, particularly linked with not moving.
Yeah, and they are just skyrocketing every single year. And as we all know, I mean, physical activity is one of the best things that we can do for our physical and mental well-being and for our mental health. And it is like, for me, it's one big package. It's like strong body, strong mind, strong will. I know that I can do difficult things because I'm showing up every single day. I'm building that follow through muscle because I'm doing the things that I say I'm going to do. I'm investing in my physical mental well-being. Like, it's taken me years and years and years to get these to become second nature.
Yeah.
But now in my 30s, they are second nature.
Yeah.
But it absolutely was not like that when I was younger. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is, like, as adults, we discover so many other ways of moving our body that feel that, like you said, show us like how it can make us feel so much more empowering than, I never really felt that when I was at school and I was doing traditional school sports.
It's
Um,
very limiting,
it's
and
very
and
limiting,
and it's limiting, and in some schools it's incredibly limited. So the opportunities for kids to find things that they actually really love just often aren't there, and I think that's a huge problem. And we can't just blame schools on that. That's
No.
society in general, and the emphasis on having access to things that can be done. Why should any gym be charging anyone under a certain age that certainly can't be earning the income to pay for that? Why should swimming pools, and I understand that a lot of them are businesses, they have to make money and so on, but it feels wrong. It feels that we should be encouraging the adults of the future to move more by saying, just try,
Yeah.
and making them spaces that they're comfortable to be in. I don't
Yeah.
know what you felt from your childhood, your school perspective, because spoiler alert, you've done some incredibly athletic, as a non-athlete, calling yourself a non-athlete, you've done some incredibly athletic pursuits and challenges since leaving university. But what were you like at school?
Well, at school, I was the type of person who kind of always believed that I could do it, or that maybe, we could win and stuff like that, but we just never did. So honestly, I'm like the epitome of it's not the winning that counts, it's the taking part, because I had to think that. And that's just kind of like how I've developed, and being able to push myself to, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, where do you think that self-belief comes from?
Well, it comes from being in that situation, over and over again, where you've got to choose. And I think that I was just reflecting on something you were saying. I think that one of the biggest issues with school sports is that it's all competitive.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to be the first or in the first team, then you have this sense of like failure, or if you're always in the second team. I mean, how demotivating is that, to be a child and be turning up to sport and just always know you're never going to be, in the first team? It's just, it's ingrained in the way the education system is, which is pushing everybody to believe that they've got to be a certain thing, or be at the top, or be the first or the first few to be successful. And everybody underneath that just feels like a bit of a failure.
Yeah.
And I think that is the issue. It's like education is set up on results, not effort.
Yeah.
And that's the problem in sport, as you know, like when you go to a yoga class or Pilates or weightlifting, whatever it is, like nobody cares. And one of the things that I say, to myself and to everybody that I coach and all my friends, I'm like, if you went to the gym, or you went and you did something and you showed up, that is better than being not going at all.
I know. And there's some lovely advice around habit formation, which is, if you want to become a runner, well, let's say if you want to become a marathon runner, you're dreaming big, but you have absolutely no thought that could actually be a thing for you, apart from a tiny little dream in the back of your head, then the best thing you can do to start with is literally put your trainers at the back door. And I love that, because the only movement involved is actually putting them on the floor, but it's all about that intention, that small plan to slowly get going. And then you will, and then slowly you will be taking part, and you will be showing up, and it takes time. As you've said, it takes years and years to get there. So going back to girls and your experience in school, sounds like it was similar to my experience of school, similar to my kids' experience of school. I don't think much has changed in a long time. So that's a whole big area that, could be redressed by some of the work that you're doing, certainly, because you're now working in schools, and we will come on to talk about that. But people are probably dying to hear about some of these challenges you set yourself. So by the time you left school, what was your relationship with movement and exercise?
Well, I think, again, like I always loved it, but I just sort of started getting myself into things where there wasn't that competitive element. So, I just didn't let it deflate me. Like when I was at school, they told me that I was terrible at sport. They were like, you won't amount to anything. And I was just like, I'm not the kind of person set out to, I know it's crazy, set out to kind of like prove them wrong. But I was just really, it just didn't make sense to me. I was like, well, I believed in myself, and I just needed to continue to keep trying, really. So that's kind of my ethos in life. It's like, at the end of the day, we're constantly inundated with external sources that are trying to define us and tell us who we are and who we aren't, and what we can be and what we can't be. But actually, I really think like the whole journey of life is to figure out who you actually are, and you've got to really fight for that person and for that vision for yourself. And so that's kind of what I've done. So when I was at university, I did quite a lot of sport. I did swimming, I did rowing. That's probably it, actually, just that sort of stuff. Like there was no gym, there was no like women's fitness at that point, so none of that. But I did those things because I liked being active and I liked being outdoors. And then it was really when I left university and I got into my first job, and I was just, again, like feeling, is this really it? I really wanted to explore my potential. And
what kind of job was that? Was that a more sedentary job?
Sorry?
Was it a more sedentary job?
Yes. Yeah. I was doing a 9-to-5 sales job for a tech startup in East London. So it was really, really fun, really engaging. But it was a million miles away from what I really wanted to be doing with my life. So I can turn to adventure sports as an outlet to explore who I really was, what my potential is, where my limits are, and again, like to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and how I can make that happen. And little did I know that it would turn into this whole insane life that I've had since then. But what I did discover was this is how I'm going to become the person that I wanted to become. And going back to what I just said about, at school, of how, there's so many external expectations and pressures and people trying to define you and your potential. For me as a young adult to take that completely into my hands and say, well, okay, well, you're telling me this thing, but I'm going to go out into the mountains and I'm going to dream as big as I can. Like you said, that little voice that says, maybe I can do this. That was the voice that was really intriguing to me. And I just started to listen to it. And what I realized is the more that you listen to it, the more that you get evidence that that voice is right, the louder that voice gets, and the more that voice wants to say, oh, well, what else can I do? Because I didn't think I could ever do that. And now I have. So, what else can we do?
So what was the first challenge you set yourself?
So the first challenge was an adventure race in the jungle of Borneo. And
which is quite a thing. I mean, to go from, I think I might do something, to go the whole way to Borneo in really extreme conditions.
It was super extreme. It was like 40 people that I'd never met. And we were camping in the jungle, on camp beds underneath tarpaulins. We did everything you can imagine. We did kind of whitewater rafting, kayaking, climbing mountains, cycling, running. We made a jungle camp one night in the middle of the jungle with machetes. Like it was incredible. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people would just kind of sign up to a 10K or a 5K race. But I tend to throw myself into the deep end. It's how I get really motivated. And when I see something that I want to do, there's not really that much that's going to stop me.
You're clearly a very driven person. Anyway, you've had that self-belief, you've had that drive, obviously from an early age. So obviously a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have the means, but also wouldn't even have the inclination to do that. So when you're speaking to people about sort of getting the confidence to get that tiny dream for whatever it is that they are wanting to do, whether it is a 10K or whether it is, go to Borneo and put yourself through extreme challenges that I'm sure most of which you haven't done before, what advice would you give people about helping themselves with that lack of confidence? Because most people, there's a barrier in the way. And this, going back to what we're saying about girls, confidence, it seems to be throughout life, but it maybe starts as a girl. I don't know. But what would you say to people about trying to improve their own self-confidence and tapping into that self-belief that you certainly have in abundance?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you feel that I have it in abundance. It's definitely not you're born with it. It's something that you train and you nurture on a daily basis. And one of my favorite quotes is, confidence is like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it gets. And that's what I think. It's like, okay, it is this follow through muscle. Confidence, in the very essence of it, in my opinion, is backing doing the things that you say that you're going to do so that you can then back yourself. So you can then have that conversation, that voice in your head that says, I've got this. That literally that is what it is. And we're fortunate if we've got people around us that also give us confidence and say, you've got this, and remind us of who we are in difficult times and stuff like that. But it has to come from inside of us. So it's setting ourselves those things that we want to do. And it's starting small. It's starting on a level that works for you. Like I said, I know myself, I do both the big and small things. I need both. Sometimes I need a really big thing to motivate me to really push and really go, leaps and leaps forward, or to up level through loads of my fears that are standing in my way. But on a daily basis, that's not possible. So on a daily basis, it's the smaller things that I set for myself, and just literally just following through on those and doing them means that when I get to the end of the day, I can look back and say, well, I did the things I said I was going to be able to do. And that is a trained muscle that is going to be stronger for the next day.
And applauding yourself for having done them. It's not just the doing, it's also the saying afterwards that I'm proud I did that. I'm pleased I did that. I feel better for doing that. And even if it was hard, I still am glad that I went through that, because as you say, you've committed to something. And yes, not every day, but as many as you can, you're consistently moving forwards so that you, as you say, you're building that evidence towards moving forwards.
That is exactly it. It's building that evidence. It's building your sometimes I think of it as like, imagine your life is like you're building, a castle, and every single day you put a little tiny building block into that. And some days you might put a big boulder in. It might be like, yes, I did a podcast today. I did a TED talk, I did something amazing. Yeah. But other days it could just be a pebble or a grain of sand. But that's what it's about. It's having that compassion for ourselves, so that over the breadth of our days and weeks and months and years, we allow ourselves to be human, and we allow ourselves to for life to get in the way sometimes. Yeah. But there's a difference between life, coming and us adapting ourselves versus like always being either in victim mode or underneath, the barrage of excuses or barriers and stuff like that. And so that's really like an individual journey. And that's where it's so important to continuously challenge yourself and to sort of, to do the things that are difficult and scary on small and big levels, so that you get to know who you are. You get to know when it's actually a real force that's kind of saying, okay, like yesterday, for example, I was just exhausted, and I had a really long nap, and I've been ill early in the week, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to allow myself to be in this space, because I know that, generally I am somebody who will do the things that I say that I'm going to do and stuff like that. So it's just having that compassion for yourself as well to journey through life.
Yeah, giving yourself permission. I like that. The phrase permission's a lovely word, because it's so kind to yourself, and we lack that. And I think going back to teenage girls, that's really difficult to achieve when potentially all around the narratives and the friends even are actually not being as kind and nice as we could. It's not necessarily always a kind world, and sometimes that children can be the worst, because there's sort of kind of no holds barred with those comments and the judgment, and that is probably one of the hardest things to navigate. And certainly as a parent, I've supporting children going through that really makes you aware of actually what you went through yourself as a child, and how much that affects you and defines you going forward, and how much you kind of have to resist against the way it was. It sometimes felt in school particularly that you were just fighting for survival, and so therefore all the thoughts about whether we should be exercising and moving, they come pretty far down in the pecking order of that survival.
Yeah, there's so I run this program Trailblazers, which I know you know about, and it's about empowering girls to build confidence and courage and the tools that we need to navigate the world. And a lot of the girls that I work with, they're called invisible, so they're sort of by their teachers or their parents, for example. And they're not the ones who are like getting into trouble or missing lessons or failing in their school work or anything like that. They are just the girls that just try to exist through life without being seen, and make themselves, as small and like invisible as possible, because of exactly what you said, because they're already dealing with so much kind of criticism or negativity or a barrage of whatever it is that's coming externally. And that might be coming from home, that might be coming from social media, that might be coming from their peers. A lot of it is also coming from within themselves, from their own inner critic, which is, really formulated from all those external sources. And it's so sad. And I, just the potential there that is wasted is what's really motivated me to go into schools and to do something about it. And what I found is that when I bring them together and we create this, I share my story with them and my motivation, my why I'm built Trailblazers and what it's all about and stuff. and my vision for them in their future, and then create this sort of network of environment of trust where they can be vulnerable. And they so quickly are able to sort of start coming out of their shells and doing things. The teachers are like, I've never seen her put her hand up before, never seen her laugh, I've never seen her smile, I've never seen her do that, and it's so incredible to see it, and just see that given the right environment, when they're not underneath the constant noise of who they should be, how they should look, how they should dress, all that kind of stuff, that actually giving them the space to figure out who they really are without all that noise is when they get to figure out that person and be that person. And that is just, I think it's so rare, and it's so important for every single one of us to find that space in our lives to be able to do that.
It's brilliant. The work you're doing is absolutely fantastic, and I'm definitely going to come on to ask you a few more questions, because obviously this is something that you want to grow and expand for the best reasons, because it's doing so much good. Just taking a quick pause because I want to tell you about a new offer exclusively for listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to improve your mobility, strength, and learn more about moving well in daily life now and to train for your 90s, come and move with me in the Reclaim Movement membership. There's weekly live coaching in term time with hundreds of replays available, as well as hordes of 5 and 10 minute mini movement videos to follow throughout your day. I'm offering you a 15% discount on your first month's membership on top of the 7-day free trial. Go to reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to create your account and quote the code podcast15. Let's move together to feel better and keep doing all the things you love. So the objectivity that you get from being pulled out of your circumstances to be able to look back in is a really difficult thing to find. But at the same time, from my perspective, even just going out for a walk in nature does that for me on the most basic level, because we're literally it's almost like we're out of the boxes that we're stuck in. We're out of the schools, the houses, whatever. We're connecting back with nature. We tend to be moving when we're outside. We're not going to be sat at a desk outside. We're moving, so we're getting that blood flowing, and we're feeling better about ourselves. And I know that that's quite a big part also of what you do. I've seen online some of the great activities and so on, and I suppose there's a connection there as well, where they're connecting back to that sort of playfulness of childhood and the things that brings for the girls, where they can explore. And obviously your experience, all the challenges you do, as far as I'm aware, none of them are indoors. They're all outside. They're all connecting with the natural world, and almost sort of challenging yourself to see how high you can climb, and not necessarily how fast you can go, but certainly to push yourself almost not against nature, but you're certainly sort of connecting with it in a different way. So when you talk about your story to girls, does that part of it come into the discussion and the messaging that you give them?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, I'm very conscious of talking about things in a way that is relatable, and so it's very much what's the message that's at the core of that, and how can they apply that to their lives. I do think that we love to kind of be safe and warm and cozy and all of these kind of things, and what you said there about when you're not batting against nature, but you are definitely fighting against the elements, but you're out there like with the elements and
experiencing them. Yes.
Yeah. And whether it's rain or storms or sunshine or snow or whatever it is, or the fear, the external environment, like all of that comes into play. And I think it's such an extraordinary kind of canvas, or what I've come to know it as is like an arena for transformation, because there's just so many incredible messages from nature as well. I just think like patience is such a key part of it. If you look at nature, like nature always knows where it's going, what it's like. It just does its thing, right? It's not in a rush. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to be like the best or the most beautiful. It just exists. And when so a few years ago I did this challenge called the Alpine Coast to Coast, and it was to climb the highest mountains in the 8 Alpine countries, and I decided to go between them by bike. It took me 32 days, and as you can imagine, I was surrounded constantly by water, and I'm a massive water baby. I'm obsessed with water. And I was so intrigued. And I, obviously when I was climbing these big mountains, the water was snow and ice and all that kind of stuff. But then as I was cycling through the mountains, it would be rivers just constantly trickling. And I came up with this philosophy, this way of life that I wanted to live by. And it was like, water always gets to where it's going to in the end. It finds its way around every single obstacle. It doesn't just go, oh, there's a big boulder here. Okay, stop. I can't go any further. It finds a way around it. And as it goes, it always carves a line as it goes, which is,
it makes a mark. Yes.
Yeah, it makes a mark, but it does it in a beautiful, graceful way, and it's just, and that sort of like patience, the flow, just all of that. I was so inspired by it. And I thought, I'm going to try and be like water as much as I can in life, and just, just sort of allow myself to flow, but having that intention, and
also the belief that is the natural order of things. Water will always flow eventually and get to the sea, rise up again, come down as rain, and keep going on this sort of beautiful cycle.
Yeah.
And therefore, allowing that, sort of believing that it will always be okay, in that sense, that you will always get there through the trials and tribulations, is a really good message, a really, really important message. Love that. And when you were doing this challenge, which sounds exhausting, so tiring, did you have any points where you struggled with your own self-motivation and your own self-belief?
Yeah, the whole time. Yeah, no, it's so one of the reasons that I did it was that I didn't just go straight into this, as like I'd built up to over many, many years. And I'd always had this, I think that in life, like, A, we can do hard things, but B, we're going to have to be doing hard things in life, like it's inescapable. And that is something that I was aware of since I was a child. And it kind of formulated the sort of the core of who I am, because it made me realize, like, life can be difficult. And, I made a commitment to myself when I was really young. You want to be somebody who is strong enough to get knocked down if it happens, but find a way to get back up and keep on moving forward. And basically that's like, the courage, the strength, the resilience, all that kind of stuff. And so when I did my Alpine Coast to Coast challenge, the reason, I wanted to put myself in that situation over and over and over again, where I felt like completely at rock bottom. And like you said, I was having mental, I was, my self-worth was low. I didn't know that I could continue doing it and find a way to keep going. And it's that part of us that we all have, like you said, that little voice in our heads that says, maybe I can. Like, it's there with every single one of us. But the problem is for most of us, it's just drowned out by the weight of the world and our own inner critic and all these external expectations and factors. And so when I put myself in this situation over and over and over again, where I had to listen to that voice and make that voice as strong as I could and develop a whole set of tools around it to keep going when I felt like I wanted to give up or I had nothing left to give, that changed me as a human being. And I already knew that it was going to, because of all the challenges I'd done before, where it changed me over and over again. But I'd never done something for 32 days consistently, where I had to just keep showing up and delivering my best. And I wanted to call on that part of myself, like my best friend, like in any time of need, who is it that you call? And we do have all these people that we want to call in our lives, which is so fortunate. But the reality is, like we said at the beginning, it's us that has to do it. And so having that ability to back yourself, I think, is the most valuable thing that we can have in life. And it's something that nobody will ever be able to take away from us.
I think a lot of people listening would just want to have a small chunk of what you have, because a lot of people don't have that support. A lot of people have not had someone rooting for them, that hasn't had their back from a young age. And yet, we still have incredible success stories in life through extreme adversity where people come out flourishing because that's in there. And they, as you say, they've tapped into it and they've had enough self-belief, and they've spotted or created opportunities and just absolutely gone for it and pushed past. And that it's such empowering messages for young girls who haven't got that life experience at all. And I'm sure you've had low points in your life and challenging points in your life, as everyone does, and therefore you can clearly be able to see that you will survive them. And it's wonderful. It's music to my ears that you use, you see movement and moving your body as a really key way to get there. So to come back to Trailblazers, so how many years ago did you set that up?
I think it was 2017 or 2018.
And tell us a bit more about exactly what you do for these. It's mainly teenage girls, yes? Yeah. So tell us what you do.
So what I do is I go into their schools, and normally I'll give a talk for either the whole school or the whole year group or whatever the teachers really want. And then ahead of time, the girls who are part of the Trailblazers program will have been selected, and they'll then stay with me after the talk, and I'll do a 2-hour workshop. So there's already that sort of like, oh, you were, instead of them feeling like they're invisible, suddenly for the first time they've been chosen to be part of something that's really special because they are just them. And then we basically do like a series of workshops, obviously like setting the tone, all that kind of stuff, talking them through it. But I then go back and I do, that workshop in that first two hours. And then I go back and do a series of workshops with them. And it's all your mindset stuff. It's confidence building. It's getting them to think outside of their box. And it's allowing them also to feel that, like you said, someone's in their corner and someone's got their back and someone's going to, really root for them. But they have to do the work. They have to show up. They have to put their, they can't just sit there and like, they can do whatever they want, obviously. But like, it's very much the tone that I set is like, we're in this together. And this is this is what you kind of can get out of this. And this is where your life, well, obviously I don't know where their life could go to, but it's just that feeling of feeling more confident and brave in your life. And, for this journey, you've got this person, you've got this team, you've got this opportunity, but you got to grab it with both hands.
Yeah.
And then I've also taken them on a couple of like adventure camps where we do all kinds of different adventure activities and workshops and reflections and gratitude practices and all that kind of stuff. And it's getting them outside. Like a lot of them have not left their boroughs in London. They've never seen, like at one point we saw the sunrise and they were just so amazed seeing the sun just move across the sky to that day. And then also I organize sailing trips. So we go on these big tall ships, sailing trips. And that is such a magical experience because, when you're on a boat, obviously you can't escape. So it's like a David Attenborough program. I've never seen growth just like sped up with my eyes. It's like they come on the boat as this one girl, and then, they're getting off at is just completely different. And we work on our values. You're obviously out in nature the whole time, but there's a lot of physical work to be done. There's teamwork, there's a lot of stuff getting outside your comfort zone that people would never normally do, and even the sleeping conditions and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's all really, really it's very special.
And can you give us any sort of examples, without obviously naming names, of that flourishing that you've seen in any of the girls? Any particular ones that sort of spring to mind, that hopefully they won't identify themselves through this, but through an obvious change that you've seen in their lives from this?
Yeah, I mean, there's one who's now a young lady, and she was suicidal when I first met her. And just in one of the workshops, she just started to cry, and I went over and just spoke to her, and I think it's just creating that space for them to be seen and to be held and supported in whatever they're going through as well. That's so special and so rare. And she is now flourishing in her life. And she became this sort of like quite a leader actually when we went on the boat trip. And she just like wasn't getting involved in the other drama in some of the other ways, and the other girls massively respected her, and it was just this really beautiful change. And she regularly gets in touch with me, her mum regularly gets in touch with me, and still tells me to this day like what it meant to her and stuff like that. And so it's really just,
and it shows the power of a shift in mindset, because ultimately, yes, they're moving their bodies in different ways. You're pushing them into physical discomfort by being in odd circumstances, or by creating physical challenges and so on. But ultimately, if you don't believe in yourself, or you can't find any of that self-belief, and someone comes along and helps you just nurture that seed, it's quite incredible what can happen. And every child on the planet deserves that, but it's just so hard to get. And as going back to the beginning of the conversation, that's what schools should be doing, but they're underfunded, overrun. It's really difficult to get that level of attention for each child. So it's really wonderful. And I love the fact that you say it is the invisibles. My kids and I talk about the school being kind of, as you say, it's like the middle section are just the sort of in the middle, and they are unnoticed, because the shiny stars at the top, who are often the sporty, the bright, the talented, the ones on stage who are really putting their own head above the parapet, and will likely probably do well because they've already got that. And then the attention is also being taken by those who are really struggling, and needing a lot more attention and getting it in the wrong ways, but it's attention still. Bless you. That's all right, bless you. It's those two sort of get more of the attention ultimately. And in fact, it's that whole massive middle section that's made up of so many more kids that actually they really need the attention too. And they're just lost by doing that. So I think it's a wonderful thing. So how are you, so this is a non-profit organization that you've set up. And so do you get in touch with schools directly, or do they come to you? How does that work?
Yeah, it's both really. So I have a lot of schools reach out to me, and they see what I'm doing and stuff like that. And I've taken it all around the world. I've done it in the Caribbean. I've been over to the US with Trailblazers, and organizations over there have been like, come and do what you're doing. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to reach out and find out more information, then please do. All my information is on Challenge Sophie. That's my Instagram and my website, and you can find my email address on there as well. So I was going to say something you mentioned earlier about about having somebody who's like really in your corner, and I think that's exactly what I realized, like how powerful that is. And I kind of really wanted to be that person to other people who don't necessarily have that from their home life, or getting at schools, because schools are so stretched. And
what you're showing shows how sort of or even a temporary interjection of that can still be really powerful. So you're with them for a short amount of time, perhaps over a few weeks and so on, but realistically it's a short amount of time in their lives, or going away on a camp and so on. And yet even that small amount can make such a significant shift, because you are tapping into that muscle that you were talking about, that self-belief and self-confidence muscle, to say, I am worthy of trying, and I can do this. That otherwise they've not known that the muscle existed. They haven't been able to flex it, and suddenly, perhaps, especially when you're younger, you question it less because it feels great from flexing it, and so you jump in, because as we were saying before, when kids feel good by something, they just go for it because they want more.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's showing them like what it feels like to actually have someone who's really in your corner and really is rooting for you. And like some of the girls that come on the sailing trips, they were like, oh, I never knew that this is what it would feel like to have someone really just independently love and support me. And I think the thing is that even if it is coming from home, it's really difficult because a lot of people think, oh, it's just my mom, like you have to believe in me kind of thing. So external sources are incredibly important when somebody really sees some potential in you and just is like, and everybody has potential. Everybody has ways in which they're born to shine and be different. And that is, again, like one of my favorite quotes is, why fit in when you were born to stand out? And I just love, I love sharing that in my talks and stuff. And I'm just like, let's just find out, like, what is the part of you that was born to stand out? Because the rest of your life is telling you that you have to fit in, to be accepted, to be liked, to be valuable, to be validated, to be loved. And actually, like, we all know that doesn't necessarily work. So let's figure out, like, what about you is so unique, and let's celebrate that and bring that person, so you can rise and shine as that person.
And that it is good to be different. What more and more we are finding in this world, that genuinely everyone is unique, genuinely everyone is different, and that's a good thing, because then you bring a different thing to the party that the person next to you doesn't. And celebrating that. And when we go back to what I was talking about, the school, this sort of big sort of slop in the middle where you're invisible, it shouldn't be, because each one of those children absolutely has all their differences, and you'll see that as adults. And I think once you take away the sort of wrappings of school, often people will lean into embracing their inner weirdo, as I say it in a positive sense, because they find they love a thing and they go for that, and they realize that makes them feel good, and why not? Perhaps in more private confines, or perhaps much more openly. And it's trying to tap into that earlier that's so important. Just to finish, you talk about, I'm very aware that a lot of my listeners will have teenage girls. They're be grandparents of teenage girls, or girls who will be teenagers, lots of caregivers. Yes, you're right. They don't listen to their parents. I only have boys, but it's exactly the same. So if you had any advice for them, if they were worrying about their girl not fulfilling their potential, or just sort of noticing they've gone into themselves, and knowing that they can be more, and wanting them to sort of not lose themselves in that, what advice would you give them? I mean, clearly the first bit would be ring up and I'll come to the school and we'll get involved. But apart from that, what advice would you give?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And so obviously I'm really passionate about empowering girls, and I think that they have all of the answers themselves a lot of the time, but they are not necessarily always listened to, and they're not always given the opportunity to put what they know or what they want to do or the answers that they have into action. So that is what I would say, is find a way to like, that's what I try to do with Trailblazers. For example, when I have interns who work with me, I literally just give them the control. I'm like, you're never going to learn if you're just like, I'm just telling you what to do. Like, you take control, you decide. I'll be there to oversee, and you can run everything by me, but here you go for it.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that. And I love seeing the dynamics at play and how they feel, if they feel they're being too bossy or they're being in charge as a leader. It's like, it's so interesting to sort of support them on that as well. So the first thing is definitely, actually ask them and listen to them, because they are so bright. They have so many fantastic ideas. Often they just need an opportunity or an outlet to actually put that into practice, rather than like, oh, you should be doing this, more should. It's just exhausting. And the listening thing, I think, is really important as well. Like, even, I don't believe in unsolicited advice. And, personally, like, it's just so funny how often people give it. And, everyone's just like, I think you should do this, I think you should do that. And it devalues you as a human being, because you feel like, well, how about firstly listen to me and see what I've already thought of, potentially doing. But often it's not a case of like not having the ideas. It's a case of you struggling with where you are at in life and your motivation and stuff like that. And so having somebody that can hold space for that and can actually sit with you and be with you in those moments and just make you feel like it's all okay, especially home, parents, grandparents, just to hold space for a teenage girl and just allow them to be is so valuable. So yeah, definitely, creating ways to actually empower them, creating ways to make them feel seen and hold space for them. And the third thing is, find ways to connect outside of and get that kind of conversation going as well. So, if there is kind of like a movement thing that you can do together, or, some kind of arts and crafty thing, or going shopping or going for lunch, like all of those kind of things, I feel like that is often a really good way to connect.
Yeah, where conversation just emerges.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's not so much so when they're older, but walking has always been one of the best tools I have had in my repertoire as a parent, because you're not eyeballing, you're
Yeah,
side to side, so it's not so intense. There's easier time to have that natural space where you're not talking at all because you're busy going from A to B. And I always used to enjoy the time where one parent would be ahead, one would be behind, kid would be off whacking the wall with a stick, being a pirate. Another child would then sort of slowly come up to you and say something, and that was the time you would hear something new coming out, and you knew that this was them wanting to share with you. And I think that's a really hard skill as a parent, is to know when that time is, when your child particularly comes to you and opens up. And knowing that there's a certain tone in the voice that means stop everything now,
yeah,
and just be there and listen, because this is important to them. And yeah, very, very hard skill, but that's wonderful advice. And I think if it can be nurturing a hobby that's either together or something that you help them to do that is sort of outside, or, as you say, creative, anything at all, and I think that's really, really good advice. I think
yeah.
go on, sorry, what were you going to say?
I would just say, like, sharing, like having some mums have come to me, or daughters, and they'd be like, oh, me and my daughter are going to do a challenge together, and that's so fun, because then you've got to train together and you can do like nutrition and like all this kind of stuff. And, it's a really lovely goal. I just love to add something else that's been kind of popping up in my mind as we've been talking. And it's basically about the I think one of the biggest issues when we're younger is that, we can't see a world beyond what we're going through. Yeah. And it can seem so, like when you're in love as a teenager, it's like
all consuming. Yeah.
It's so all consuming. So everything that we go through when we're younger is so all consuming. And, I got bullied at primary school and secondary school. So I went through it both of those schools. And what helped me through that was my family. And my mum actually walked into school one day when I was, I think about 8 years old. And she went for a meeting with my headmistress and like talked about me being bullied. And the headmistress like flatly denied that there was any bullying that went on her school. And my mum basically walked straight into my classroom and she said to me, grab your bag, we're leaving.
Wow.
And she literally walked in, she took me out of there and she was like, I'm not going to allow you to be in a school where they won't even believe what's happening to you. And I genuinely think, going back to that conversation about being different, like I genuinely feel that the reason that I was bullied was because, I wasn't afraid to be myself when I was younger, and I was just different, like, kids are. And I think what happened in that moment is like stayed with me forever, because life can often crush us and pull us down. But then when we, being brave, I think that, the bravest thing to do in life is really to be ourselves in a world that's constantly telling us who we should be. And that's what happened in that moment, was that I even subconsciously made that decision of like, oh, I don't have to put up with these people who are trying to tell me I should be different. And like, I can remove myself from situations. And it's throughout my life, like even now, later on in my life, I do not subject myself to people who don't make me feel good, or like if I walk into a room and I feel like people are, that sort of thing where it's cliquey, or people are like this, they don't involve you in a conversation. I've been in so many different rooms, so many different conversations, so many different worlds now, that I know I can remove myself from that. And I know I've got my small network of my family and my friends who know who I am, who believe in me and see me for who I am, that I don't need to put myself in this situation with people who make me feel bad.
It's so true, and quite frankly, there are many adults who've had a lot more life experience even than you that need to hear that, because we need to do what makes our hearts sing in life. We need to be with the people who advocate for us, support us, encourage us, and not those who don't. And it can be the hardest thing to learn to be able to extricate yourself from those difficult situations, or when something doesn't feel right. But like you're saying, you've tapped into your gut from a really early age, telling you this isn't right, and it doesn't make me feel good, and therefore it doesn't nourish me, and therefore I'm not going to go there. And that's a really brave thing to do, because as you say, you have this you've nurtured this skill to be able to push back against what everything and everyone around you is telling you should be doing. But you said, no, my gut's more important than this. And that's possibly one of the best survival skills that girls, adults alike, at whatever age, can develop. So it's a really, really good point to make. I just want to finish on saying again about Trailblazers. It's really great to go and have, obviously to research this, I went and took a deep dive into all your interesting stories, and you've got a wonderful TEDx talk, and there's so many incredible challenges that are really, really inspiring. But what's most impressive to me is that you have taken lessons from that. You've really understood how you can then take that and help other people. And the fact that you've chosen such sort of an I'm not sure the word is I'm looking for, but a group of people that really hasn't got the attention that it needs. And knowing that often when teenage girls do sort of lose themselves, even just in terms of statistics about how much they then go on to move as an adult, women do not move as much as men. And does that start early and outside of movement, and how much of that comes down to the confidence and all those exterior factors. So I think you're doing a really, really wonderful thing. And so challengesophie.com is your main home, and similar on socials. And I just want to say a huge thank you for giving us time to learn so much more and hear about your viewpoint.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's been such a pleasure. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you again soon in person.
Definitely. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.